told this story of my parents' old house when I was living with them before college. I live in a small cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. The next nearest neighborhood is over 4 miles away. One night a few years ago we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. So far from main roads, and on the weekend I knew our roads will remain unplowed for quite some time. I went to my outback deck door to look at the snow-draped trees and the still heavily falling flurries and take some pictures when I noticed footprints leading to my door, then turning around and leaving. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbor's side and thought that one of their more delinquent kids played a joke as my sledding tube on the railing was popped. I decided I'd wait till later, as it was early to call their parents. I went on Facebook, and after scrolling for a bit I noticed one of my neighbors closer to the entrance posted, "Did someone knock for me or something at my back door?" I immediately called her, talked, and told her I have an idea. I called the first house on the entrance and told him what was going on. He went and checked, and sure enough, they were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end and they told me there was none there. Then I got a call from my next door neighbor. She called the woman that lives next to the end house. She said that there were footprints that led to her door, but none led away. We already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said that it's an emergency now. They told us the roads are still all unplowed and they can't send a plow truck to clear the way as they are a privately owned company. The woman was losing it, so one of the husbands, huge bear of a man, across the road from her texted her to say he was coming over to invite her over. He came and she left. We put up one guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 p.m. a plow truck came as well as 3 cop cars. The couple she was staying with and her went to her house and stood in the doorway as the police searched. They found nothing. She begged them to keep looking, so they did. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time only one came up. He took her to the side room and we could hear hysterical crying. By now we are all out there. Me and a few of the other guys started towards the door when several police confronted us. They told us they found someone hiding under a cover opening in the stairwell that she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later a scruffy man screaming and kicking came out in cuffs and was led away. In his little campout they found blankets she just cleaned and put away in the room next to hers. She stayed in other people's houses for a long time before going back. Even then she wouldn't stay alone. She sold the house the next summer. He turned out to be a thrill-seeking junkie who was on probation for assault against a family member. The cops told us that they feel like he didn't want to stay at his apartment after a fight with his roommate and drove off in his roommate's car from the county over and got stuck in our unplowed roads. And that is why you always make sure you locked your doors. Gather round, boys and gals, and I will tell you the chilling tale of the twisty tie lady. I have posted this once before, but figured I'd share it again. Apologies in advance for formatting, I'm on mobile. This happened about 12 years ago. I was still living at home in high school. My parents purchased a condo from a family friend and we moved in. The lady, family friend's mother, we bought the condo from had passed away of natural causes inside the condo. She was an older lady, friendly from what I hear. She also dabbled in sorts of witchcraft, black magic. I don't believe she was casting evil spells on anyone, more of hobby, I suppose. So anyway, we move in. Most of her belongings were left behind, so my parents kept the stuff they needed. Mostly furniture and coffee tables. After months of living there, we had a suspicion that we weren't alone. Now, this wasn't your typical haunted house scenario. There were no flickering lights, strange noises or lurking shadows that led us to this belief. It was twisty ties. Yes, just like the ones that come with the loaves of bread you buy from the store. Every now and then, we would find these strange twisty ties around the house. These random-ass twisty ties would seemingly appear out of thin air, almost strategically placed so they would be noticed. Like, I'd be hanging out on the couch watching TV, go to the kitchen to fetch a tasty beverage and come back to find a stray twisty tie just chilling on the coffee table. We'd find them wrapped around cords, on countertops, in desk drawers, even one time wrapped around my toothbrush. each one unique in the shape, color, and placement. It certainly wasn't a shit your pants moment, but over time living there, you'd start to look for it and anticipate it. There were 3 of us that lived there, and of course, we all blamed each other, and of course none of us ever fessed up to it. Over the years, however, there were enough isolated instances each one of us had encountered to deny it. It was kind of fun, actually. We named her the Twisty Tie Lady, and I started to collect them in my nightstand drawer just for funsies. I always wondered, why twisty ties? I tried extensive research on the web about twisty ties and if they had any significance in witchcraft, and found nothing. A few years later, after moving out, I had learned that when the lady was alive, it became a little inside joke between her and daughter, the family friend, to save all her twisty ties for further use. I guess that was her way of reaching out in the afterlife. Sadly, the condo complex had been wiped out from a flood. But to this day, every time I see a twisty tie, I smile. Okay, this is 100% true, even though most people I tell this to in real life don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally we got to the door, he unlocked it, swung it open and said, "See, there's nothing." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with the knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. Edit. Oh yeah, I forgot that after she left, my dad called and warned my crazy uncle who lived next door what was happening. Apparently he was waiting on his front porch with his shotgun when she walked by. He pointed it at her and just said, "Keep moving, bitch." Update. I just talked to my mom and she said that they never really found out the whole story, but apparently she was crazy and off her medication. Her and her husband got into a fight and she tried to attack him with the knife, but didn't seriously hurt him. When he got her out of the house, she cut herself with the knife, either trying to commit suicide or make it look like her husband did it. The police never talked to us about it, so that's just what they heard from the woman's neighbors. When I was younger, we frequently visited my grandparents around holidays even though we didn't live in the same town. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents. The lady in the house between was creepy. She was a large woman, over 6 feet. She wore logging chains around her neck, dress and work boots. The only time I remember seeing her outside was either in her garden in the back or when she was washing the outside of her house, scrubbing the actual building. She did this often. During these times she would yell at us kids and call us all kinds of things. She would tell us the devil would be coming for us. The adults told us to leave her alone and to avoid her. We would run the distance between my aunts and my grandparents because when you passed by she was watching out the windows. It was creepy and we never went alone. One Halloween one of the cousins dared us to trick or treat her house. I remember how scared I was, but I didn't want to be a chicken. Plus I was going with the group. One of us rang the doorbell and there was a lot of banging noises in the house, suddenly like doors slamming. When she answered the door she had a severed head in her hands and we all went screaming. The adults told us it was a Halloween prop and we knew we shouldn't be bothering her and deserved to be scared. About a month later, my parents got a phone call that the lady had tried to kill my aunt while she was bringing in groceries and had my young cousin in her arms. The lady had one of them rope saws and had come up behind my aunt with it. She put it over her head and around her neck and proceeded to saw. My aunt naturally flipped and started kicking the door. My uncle came and beat the lady down with a fire poker. The police investigation revealed that the woman had been digging tunnels under her home which were coming up under my aunt's, my grandparents' and another neighbor's house. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in the raised beds of the gardens. She also had a shrine of some sort underground which had a few severed heads around it. My aunt survived, by the way, but has a long scar across her neck. TLDR, while trick or treating I was chased off by someone holding a real, severed human head. Firstly, my wife is also a Redditor and has been severely traumatized by our recent experience. She does not like to talk about this, so to prevent anyone from sending her messages, this is a throwaway account. My wife and I buy our first house in February of 2010. We immediately fell in love with it as soon as we laid eyes on it. It had everything we wanted and plus a few extras. For the first month, everything was great. Lots of painting and decorating, getting it just the way we wanted. Then, weird things started to randomly happen. First it was small things, like things upstairs being moved, put in completely different rooms than where they belonged. I chalked it up to my wife just forgetting to put things back where they belonged. The house also started to creak, pretty loud. This is a fairly new house, so I just figured it was probably settling, as most new houses tend to do. One day, the wife and I was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Our stairs sit right next to the kitchen entrance, so any noises upstairs were clearly audible into the kitchen. I turned off the water at the sink and as soon as I did, we both heard a cough. We have no kids and no one was visiting. The windows were all shut, the television was not on. This sent the coldest chill down my spine and I could feel the blood running out of my face. I looked at my wife and she too had gone pale and had this look of absolute fear. Someone was in our house and they were upstairs. I quickly grabbed the sharpest knife I could find and my wife called the police. I walked to the bottom of the steps and stood silently and heard a loud pop creak, just like the ones I had always heard the house make. My hands were shaking and my wife was whispering to the 911 operator, telling them we think we may have a robber in our home. The police arrive in minutes. Thankfully, they had been patrolling nearby. The officer walks slowly up the stairs, gun drawn. He calls out, "This is the police, is anyone upstairs?" No response. I'm right behind him, walking up the stairs. We look into the first bedroom and closet. Empty. No one in the half bath either. Last room is my office where I have my PC. No one in the room or the closet. I felt the tension ease away and felt like a complete tool, making this officer search the house, only to find nothing. We turned to walk out of the room and right above us, creak. I just about shat bricks. In my office closet, there is an attic access. The officer pulls the steps down and again calls out, "Is anyone up there?" This is the police. No response. He turns on his flashlight and peeks his head up. He finds a man, in his 40s, kneeling there in the attic, looking dead at him. Gun drawn, he tells the man to come out and put his hands behind his head. They arrest the man. He didn't say a word the whole time and would not look anyone in the eye. He was scruffy looking and had dirty clothes on. Me and my wife were freaking out. I don't think either of us have fully gotten over it. After questioning the man in the police station, we found out that he was a homeless man who found refuge in the house while it was still on the market. He said the doors were unlocked and so he stayed there. Apparently, a realtor must have forgotten to lock the door after showing someone the house. He said that when people would come to the house, he would hide in the second-floor attic. We bought the house, and this guy was living in it for a whole month, without us even knowing. It really freaks me out still just thinking about it. TLDR, don't shrug off all those bumps in the night. You could have a homeless man living in your attic. I was staying at a cave hut in Wales on my own once, and had a pretty creepy experience. I stay at very remote cave huts a lot, but never before on my own. This cave hut is huge. It used to be 10 terraced miners' cottages, and has dozens of bunk rooms and common rooms downstairs. It's utterly remote, and it doesn't have any curtains or blinds, so there's no way of telling if anyone is looking in the windows when it's dark. Not that that's very likely, given the remoteness of the place, but I did get a shock when I saw the glowing eyes of some sheep looking in the kitchen window at me. There's no phone reception, no neighbors, and it's halfway up a Welsh mountain. There is a payphone in the conference room, but it's supposed to be for emergencies, cave rescue call-outs, etc., and I didn't even know how to turn it on. This place is so creepy that they used it as a set for one of the episodes of Torchwood. Countryside, the episode about the cannibalistic Welsh villagers. I'm a fairly rational person, but I was definitely getting myself a bit worked up once it went dark. The sheep incident particularly scared the bejesus out of me. But the bit of the hut I find spookiest, apart from the curtainless windows, is the bunk rooms upstairs. Because the hut was converted from 10 cottages, there's no main hallway either upstairs or downstairs, and all the rooms connect in a rambly, circular sort of way. Most of the bunk beds are triple height, so there's pretty much no way to see all of a room at once, and the lights go off on a timer. I picked a bottom bunk in a room that had double-width bunk beds, and went to bed early. I'm woken up at about 2 a.m. by very loud banging coming from the radiator pipes, which are right by my head. I initially panic, but convince myself that it's either the heating coming on, or else another group of cavers has arrived very late and are having showers, cooking. Due to the size of the place, there could well be another group that I hadn't heard arrive. So I go back to sleep. About an hour later, I am woken up again by more banging, but this time it's more like wood on wood, and it's coming from the ceiling. It's almost like someone wearing boots, stamping on the wood of the attic floor above me. This time I nearly shit myself. The only thing that stopped me leaving the room was the thought of all those spooky dark bunk rooms outside my room. Eventually it stopped, and somehow I went back to sleep. It's only when I woke up the next morning that I realized that there was no way the pipe noise could have been the heating, because it's never turned on. No other people have arrived overnight either, so that rules that out. That morning, few local cavers come up to the hut and I get talking to one of them about what I heard. He tells me that he had a similar experience in that room. He's a very superstitious person and instantly accepted that it was a ghost or similar in the attic. I'm much more skeptical. So he decided to go up into the attic and investigate what was up there. Even though I'm a skeptic, what he said next sent shivers down my back. The attic room up above that room is not boarded, meaning that there's no way a ghost could have been stamping on the floor in the attic. So the only rational explanation, in his opinion, was that it was actually stamping, or banging, on the ceiling of the bunk room. The bunk room I was asleep in. I've never stayed at that hut alone again, and I've never slept in that particular bunk room. Edit, sorry this turned into a bit of an essay, I'd forgotten just how scary this particular experience was. TLDR, I stayed on my own in a spooky hut and got terrified by a ghost stamping around upside down on the ceiling of my bedroom. Pretty freaky thing happened to me and 4 of my friends when we were in middle school. 2 of my friends lived 3 houses down from each other, and across the street from their houses was a church and maybe half an acre of woods. This is in the middle of a suburban neighborhood, so there are just a bunch of houses surrounding the woods church. So my friend, let's call him T, his brother, other friend, let's call him D, and third friend, A, who lived not too far, were all playing some manhunt, what 14-year-olds call hide and seek when played at night, and decide to split up into 2 teams and go into the woods. D and I were together, and T went with his brother and A. They go into the woods and D and I walk up to the church. The church was left open most of the time, so we decided to sneak into it and hide out in the front room. Never got creepy vibes or anything from it, so we didn't think twice about going inside. We get up to the door and it's locked. Weird. So we turn around and start walking back towards the parking lot. For some reason I had turned around and looked back at the church as we were walking away. We both hear this impossibly loud sort of growling coming from what sounded like everywhere, which made it even scarier because we didn't know which way to run. To call it growling almost doesn't seem right because of how odd this sound was. It was so incredibly deep and low-pitched, and yet at the same time just so fucking loud. So we panic and run towards T's house across the street. As we're running we see T, his brother, and a bolt out of the woods maybe 30 yards away from us, also running towards T's house. I remember yelling something along the lines of, "Did you guys hear it too?" To which T replied with something like, "Yeah dude, just run." We get to T's house, and once we get inside we all make rounds around the house locking all the windows and doors. We start talking about the noise and T says right before it happened they saw some long, strange shadow of a thing lurking around the woods not too far from where they had all been hiding. I live in Florida, and I suggested it may have been a panther. I've seen a panther only twice in my life, and once was in a zoo. I've heard the noises they make and there's no way what we heard was a panther, nor was it a bear, alligator, or any other animal I've ever seen here in the wild. Never heard, saw it again. Actually ended up banging 2 of my girlfriends in that parking lot in high school without anything spooky happening. TLDR, friends and I got spooked by a church demon. Shit was freaky, yo. Not 15 minutes ago I had this on my mind and was hoping I'd find a thread like this in Ask Reddit. Anyway, it began when my best friend and I were about 12 years old. We also had another good friend who was about 8/9 at the time. We lived in Kentucky, so there are all kinds hills and wooded areas all around you whether you live in a trailer up a hollow somewhere you were in the suburbs. My friends and I spent almost every day with one another. We would lay with our DBZ toys, play our Pokemon games, or play with our Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards all day, and then once it got dark outside we'd sit out on the back porch and just talk about space, religion, and the supernatural. One night, we started hearing this noise out in the woods. It was a muffled clapping noise. The best way to describe it is as if someone were wearing thin silk gloves and clapping. It would come in 5-second increments. We thought it might be deer butting heads or something. But then we dismissed it because it would always be perfectly timed and only when we weren't talking about. This eventually went on for over a year. Every night we would hear the clapping when we were outside at night, and the frequency would always increase when we discussed it. One night we were sitting in the backyard and I broke the horrible news to my friends that my family was moving out of the neighborhood. Right after I told them the clapping started up. After we got done sniffling about and being sad that I was moving, literally only 15 miles away, and stood up and said, "But first let's figure out what that clapping is." So we grabbed our little video recorder we used for stop motion videos and started to climb up the hill. We still have the video and we went back a couple months ago and watched it. Sadly nothing spooky jumped out at us. But right as soon as we started climbing our younger friend ate shit and slid down a 10-foot drop, so we helped him up and decided to turn back. Now this is where it gets bizarre. After I moved, our younger friend did as well, leaving the other guy who was roughly 13 at this point. Of course he had a little sister and eventually his girlfriend that he would go outside with at night, but the clapping was gone. We've stayed best friends since then and I still went over to his house on a regular basis, but since I moved the clapping had 100% stopped. We're 21 now, and 2 months ago we found ourselves home from uni and sitting on his back porch just chatting it up till about 1 AM. When he brings up the clapping. Now at this point everything I've told you is the truth. I don't know if this is true or not, but he said he did some research and according to some article he found the clapping noise is some sort of demon that lures children into the woods. Of course I gave it a giggle and shrugged it off because he's the type of person that's always desperate for excitement and exaggerates a little. Not a minute later he goes, "Oh my god, did you hear that?" "No, what was it?" "I heard the clapping." "Yeah right, sure man." But then I listened carefully and surely enough it was back. Just the same as before, and it went on for 20 minutes before other weird noises started coming from the hill. There were what seemed like 2 trees fall in the woods out of nowhere too. This is when I decided 2:30 AM was a good time to go home. If anyone has any idea what this could have been, please share.